Hey folks, and welcome back to the channel, unless this is the first time you're here, in which case hello. So today's video isn't particularly me strolling around a location, although I am, but a while ago, probably a few years ago now, I posted a video on my channel showing the basics of processing infrared photos, and as it's a sunny day I thought I'd do some more infrared, and I figured what would be a good idea is to show the effect you get from 3 different types of filter, because I've seen a few comments about, when I do my conversion, which filter should I use. So I figured find somewhere with some trees, and then do some comparison shots with 3 different filters, see how we get on. So there's obviously plenty of trees around here, but try and find one that's mildly pleasing. And there's a big one at the end of this path which looks quite nice, so we'll see if we can use that for the first shot maybe. Right, so I've got 3 filters with me, and the first one I'll probably show you is the 720, which is the middle of the 3, I guess, as far as light cutoff is concerned. So a quick recap. Basically visual light, as it gets towards red, it then tails off after that into infrared, which we can't see. But once you've removed the infrared blocking sensor from your camera, it can see infrared. So what we then do is fit a filter of some description to block the visible light, so we only get the infrared. Now you can either do this as part of your conversion, so the conversion company will replace the sensor filter cover with one that you choose. The approach I took was to remove that altogether, and instead I use filters on my lenses. The advantage of that is I can choose between different infrared filters depending on the effect I want. The disadvantage is I need several different filters for different lens diameters. Hopefully that all made sense. Anyway, so the first one we're going to look at, like I say, is the 720 here. If I put this over this little camera, you'll see it goes very dark red. Also, this would have had to whack its exposure up a lot because this little camera I'm talking to you now on hasn't been converted. But we'll see when we put it on the main camera that the shutter speeds remain pretty constant. So, first thing to do is show you what it looks like without any filter on there. So hopefully you can see the image of the camera showing there, and you'll spot that the sky is still got a little bit of blue in it, although it's more purple, and then the landscape underneath is predominantly red. So what I'm going to do is grab the 720 and screw that onto the front. Okay, what you should have noticed now is that the image has gone predominantly quite red, and you can kind of change the white balance to alter how you show it. So I think I made a custom setting which just eases off the red a little bit, but you can also choose to convert to mono when you're staring through the viewfinder as well, which will sometimes help composition. Now annoyingly, the sun has just popped in behind a light bit of cloud, so the contrast in the picture isn't quite as much as I would hope. So I think what I'm going to do is wait a moment or two for the sun to reappear, and then we can take the shot. Well, that cloud took ages to disappear, but hopefully you can see now the leaves on the tree are a lot brighter. So I'm going to quickly grab the shot before there's another cloud. Another one just to make sure. Quickly just tweak the focus a little bit. What you can hopefully see is that the image is sort of super sharp, and that's because the removal of the infrared filter actually removes the anti-aliasing part of it off the sensor as well, I think. I'm sure I read that. I might be lying, but anyway, these often come out quite sharp. So that's that image, and what I'm going to do now is switch to a different filter. Okay, so the next filter is this one, which you'll see is quite orange, So this lets through even more visible light, so it sort of lets through the upper end of the oranges and reds before they go through to infrared. So this is a 590 nanometer, so let's stick that on the camera. So you might be initially thinking it doesn't look a huge amount different to the first image, but you can probably see there's a bit more colour in the sky. The reason for using this filter is you can basically process these images to get a lot more colour out of them, and we'll see that later when we get them onto the computer. So for now, while the sun is still out, let's grab our standard shot. Again, just double check the focus. Should be pretty similar to before. It is always worth checking though, because infrared light tends to focus at a slightly different point to visible light. So that's why if you're using something like a DSLR, you may well have to kind of adjust your micro focus settings in the camera. With mirrorless it's less of an issue because it uses the image on the sensor to focus, so I prefer to do it manually for these anyway. So that's got our image there, and time to go for the third filter. So for the third filter I need to actually swap lenses to my little 28, because I only have this one in a 52mm thread, and the other two filters I was using are 67, which is why I was using the 35mm. So when I get these on the computer, I'll probably just crop in the images from the 28 just to give a similar field of view to what we've got from the 35. So let's switch these over on the camera. Okay, so hopefully you can spot that this one is very different to the previous two, and the image is sort of very purple, I guess. So this is the 850 nanometer, so this is not letting through any visible light whatsoever really, and it's at the sort of top end of the infrared. Now you probably can't tell here because it looks purple, but when we get these on the computer, images from the 850 tend to be very hard to get any colour out of, so these are almost always going to end up being converted to black and white. What it does do is gives you probably the strongest contrast black and white image out of the three available options. So again, still got plenty of sun, but let's grab the shot. So as before, just check where we're focusing. And obviously you can see that this is a slightly wider shot because I'm using the 28mm. But anyway, that's three shots of this nice tree with all the filters. So let's go and find a different location. I'm following a bit of an unofficial path here, I think, and it looked on the map like it might head down to the river, but so far it seems to keep sort of consistently turning away from the river. But I can hear water, so yeah, maybe there's something down here. I'm not sure how effective it'll be, but I've just done one picture with each filter, just looking down the river here. It's a little bit dark, but the trees in the distance are glowing quite nicely in the sunlight, so it might come out, we'll see. Anyway, I'm going to head back the way I came now, I think, and see what else I can find. So the next shot I did was just at the ford you can see behind me, which is quite a nice little spot, but I didn't hang around and record any video there because there was a little kid waiting to jump in and go swimming, and his mummy told him to wait for the man to finish, which was nice of her, so I decided to grab the shots and run. Anyway, there's a little tyre, that's the word. Where's my head gone? Better. There's a tyre hanging on a bit of rope over the water, which is quite photogenic, but I don't know how well it'll come out in infrared. Anyway, walking back up to the car, I'm probably going to then head vaguely in the direction of home, which is a few miles away. I may stop somewhere else. If something appears, it's worth shooting. We'll see. So for the last images, what I've done is I've driven just over to the other side of town, and I've come along to this nice little church car at a village called South Pickenham. You can probably see it's got a round tower. There's lots of churches in Norfolk with round towers for reasons, construction probably. I read it once. Anyway, I've just taken a picture with the 28mm lens at the side of the road, so that's the one, if you remember, has the 850 filter on it. So I'm just going to now switch over to the 35 and take the other two shots. Hopefully I can fit it in. It was sort of just about right with the 28. The 35 might be a little bit tight, but we'll see. Right, so that'll do for a sample of images. So the next thing to do is to get back and get them onto the computer and start doing a few edits just to see the difference the different filters make. Okay, so back home. It's actually a few days later, hence different t-shirt. I think it's a different t-shirt. Maybe I was wearing the same t-shirt in the earlier video. Can't remember. Anyway, it's about a week or two later. So yeah, the next thing to do is have a look at the images on the computer and see what difference the different filters make. So, if you remember, we started off with this delightful tree, and this is the image shot with the 720 filter, which was the sort of medium effect of the three. So the first thing to do is to apply the profile, and if you're not sure what this means or what it's doing, have a look at the original infrared video I made a few years ago, which I'll link to up here and in the description below. This basically gives us a huge range of adjustments on white balance, which you don't get with a standard camera profile. So that's the reason we apply that. And what I can actually do is just synchronize that across all of these images quickly to save me picking it each time. Okay, so back to the original. First thing to mention is I often find with infrared shots some chromatic aberration, and I don't know whether it's just certain lenses are worse than others. This one looks okay, but I think it's probably my little 28mm lens tends to exhibit it a bit worse. So if I zoom in on this one, you'll see some sort of red and blue fringing around all these leaves. So I tend to just go and turn that on, and that gets rid of that nicely. It's subtle, but it's enough to make a difference. So I guess let's process to begin with the 720. So the first thing I want to do, which I'll do with all of these, is set an initial white balance on something fairly neutral. So I'll often just pick a bit of cloud for that, because clouds ideally want to be white. The next thing to do is just to check that we're not overexposing or underexposing. So we've got the little markers in Lightroom here. It's showing us that maybe the shadows are just being slightly clipped. So we can have a look and check for that. Yeah, there's just a few little light blue splotches you can see, so we can lift the blacks to get rid of those. And then that little marker disappears. To get that screen up, just in case you didn't know, you hold down the Alt key on the keyboard. I'm not sure what it is on Mac, but it basically lets you sort of see the clipping point as you adjust the image. And we can do the same for the whites as well. So obviously if we turn that up, we start clipping horribly. I think we can probably leave that where it was. So the next thing to do is the channel swap. I still haven't worked out how to do this in Lightroom. I'm not even sure if it is possible. I thought I read somewhere you could do it by messing around with the tone curves. But I will stick to doing it the way I know, so we need to put this into Photoshop. Okay, here we are in Photoshop, and we will do the flipping of the channels, which again was described in the previous video. What we do is we basically leave the green alone, but we swap the reds and the blues, and that gives us this kind of image. So the sky has now gone more towards blue, and we also have sort of pinkish colour to the foliage. So I might just go into the camera raw filter quickly. And just fine tune the white balance a little bit more. Just sort of pick different areas of the clouds just to try and cool the sky down, because you can see there's sort of got a pinkish halo in the sky above the tree, and that's caused mainly because this lens is probably giving a slight sort of infrared hotspot. So we can also just turn down the temperature slider to bring us back to where we want to be, and that also takes away the sort of teal colour in the sky, brings it back towards blue. You can also kind of do that if you need to by going to the colour mixer, and usually it's this aquas slider. If you turn that more towards blue, it would get rid of that that colour that was in there earlier. And again, you can play with the blue slider, but in this case it's taking it either green through to purple, so we'll leave that where it is. Okay, so that'll do for a quick edit on that, just so we can see the effect. I won't spend ages on these. Okay, so let's repeat the process now with the 590. Was it 590 or 580? God, I'm useless at remembering these things. Okay, same process as before. So pick a white balance off something neutral like a cloud. You'll instantly see the colours on this compared to with the 720 are a lot more vibrant. So although the foliage has gone a sort of slightly bluish colour on the 720, it's gone very blue here, and we've got a lot more orange in the sky. So over to Photoshop, and I'm going to get rid of that little dust bunny up there because it's annoying me. So let's do the channel flip on this image. Okay, and like before, the sky has gone a little bit of a teal colour with some sort of orange hazing above. What you will also notice is that the foliage has sort of gone to a couple of different shades depending on the type of plant. So whilst a lot of it is this sort of orange colour, some of it's gone sort of purple. So it's just showing how different types of plants are kind of letting their colours come through a little bit more than they would have done with the 720. So let's just tweak the white balance to get the sky back to blue again. There we go. Okay, and we'll take that one back into Lightroom as well. Okay, and let's repeat the process again now with the 850. So as I mentioned before, this one doesn't really let any visible light through. We're only really seeing the infrared here, and you'll spot that everything is quite similarly toned. So again, we can pick a neutral-ish white balance off a cloud, and we can take it into Photoshop to do the channel swap. Now I'm doing this, but it's kind of pointless because everything is the same colour. There's not an awful lot of point swapping the channels, because all we end up with is an image that's still a consistent tone, but you know, it is all the same. There's no difference between the sky and the foliage. They're all this same shade of pink. So I'm actually just going to close this without saving and go back into Lightroom. Okay, and this is why I said that generally these images are mostly going to be useful for black and white. So we can just basically take the saturation right down and try and get the widest range we can. So pull down the highlights a bit, add in some clarity and texture, So this is probably a little bit of a messy scene, to be honest, but this is the kind of processing you would probably do with the 850 filter, just to get a nice mono out of the end of it. If we zoom in, you can see all that nice detail on the leaves. Horrible dust bunnies on my sensor, so we can get rid of that, hopefully. Oh, it's randomly picked a piece of cloud there. I probably would get rid of that in Photoshop, to be honest. It seems to do a better job than the one that's built into Lightroom. Also the horrible one at the top there. But let's go back to the other ones here. So the main difference is the amount of colour that we get in the 590 compared to the 720. And as a starting point for your edits, obviously this one, if you're going to go wild with the colours, certainly has a lot more to offer. So again, we can do some quick cranking up of clarity and texture. We can even add a bit of dehaze if we wanted to make the sky a bit more dramatic. Play around with the sky colour, maybe desaturate that a little bit so it's not quite so so scary. There's all sorts of things you can do, and I guess the 720 you can do the same kind of stuff. You just have kind of a little bit less leeway, I suppose, but we can play with the colours in the same kind of way. So the blues we can take down if we want to, or add some saturation to if we want to. Bring the sky up a little bit. If we want the foliage to be white rather than that sort of pinkish colour, we can just crank down the saturation on the colours which are affecting it. So that can be quite a nice effect as well. That's the sort of fun of infrared. You can kind of play with these however you really want. So I won't take you through editing all of these because it's going to be really dull, but let's just have maybe a quick look at the church one as a final example, and again see what colours we can sort of pull out of this one. So before I do anything, I'm going to set my white balance off a cloud like before. Just check shadows and highlights aren't being clipped, so let's pull this over into Photoshop. Okay, get rid of that little dust bunny there and do the channel swap. One day I'll record a macro for doing this, but it does only take a couple of seconds. Okay, and let's just fix up the white balance to get that blue sky back in here before we go back into Lightroom. So we can either turn the colour temperature down, but what that's starting to do is then make the stone of the church go this sort of pinkish hue, which I don't really like. So I'll reset that, and what I'm instead going to do is target the change just to the blue channel. So again, it's this kind of aqua colour that we care about, and we just shift this over towards the blue, and that's giving us a nice blue sky back, but without kind of making a mess of the church tower. What we could also do is try making the stone of the church our kind of neutral point. So just out of curiosity, if we take the white balance dropper and do that, that looks fairly awful to my mind, but it's made everything go a bit too bright, so let's pull the exposure down a bit. I don't know what you think. I think the foliage colour now has gone a bit of a sort of sickly, like, you know, if your urine was that colour, you'd want to be seeing the doctor. So I think I'm going to put that back to how it was, and I kind of prefer the slightly vibrant orange that we have there. If you wanted, you could do things like mask the church building, get rid of some of the saturation off that, just to make it stand out a little more from the foliage in the background on the trees and the ground. But I'm going to keep that probably as it is now and back into Lightroom. And then we can play with this a little bit like we did before, so add a bit of clarity. Again, it's kind of personal preference how you edit these. I like to give them a little bit of just extra pop with those tools, but obviously don't go crazy, because you can whack all the sliders up and then it just starts to look a bit horrific. So undo all those. So hopefully that's given you a bit of a taster as to the effect that those 3 different filters will give you. Obviously the editing I've done here has been pretty quick. You would probably spend a lot longer on your images to get the effect that you want. But hopefully that has been useful, and if you're thinking of buying some infrared filters, you've got a better idea now of which one you might want, or which ones. Maybe you want to experiment with all 3 styles. Hopefully you found it useful, like I say. So thank you for watching. If you haven't already, do feel free to subscribe to the channel and let me know what other videos you might like to see in this area. Otherwise, give it a like, and yeah, I'll see you again soon, hopefully. Thanks for watching. Bye.